Tarek, yesterday we published a story that I wrote about the just gruesome and horrifying discovery of 5 Palestinian newborns who on November 10th up until November 10th were being cared for diligently and carefully by physicians in the neonatal intensive care unit at al-Nasr Hospital in Gaza City, and as Israeli forces did with many hospitals and medical centers across Gaza in the last few weeks, they stormed the hospital. They ordered physicians, patients, and family members, and also displaced people who were taking shelter in the hospital, to leave at gunpoint. And the physicians were not allowed to take these newborns that need intensive care with them. The Israeli army apparently told the physicians and the parents that the Red Cross would take care of them, but that failed to happen. And then on Tuesday, a journalist was let back into the hospital 17 days later and saw that the infants had been left alone to die alone, with their intubation and intravenous lines still there, attached to their tiny bodies. I mean, the footage here that you can see, obviously the babies are blurred out, but it just it's an unspeakable situation there. And I wrote about this, and we were just talking on the phone yesterday, you and I, about just the horror of this situation. And what's your reaction to what happened? What does it say about the sadistic nature of Israel and its accomplices that would let this happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really obvious here. When we kind of look at such a terrible situation, we have to really take a moment and mourn the victims of October 7th and condemn Hamas for what they've done. It's somewhat obscene to me that while these things are happening, we're constantly being sort of told that the Israeli army is doing something good here, that they're liberating people, that they're even honoring the memories of people who were killed. It's such a absolute travesty to see this happen. And for me, obviously, the thing that hurt me the most, having watched people die, I made a commitment to myself when I was pretty early on as a doctor that I would never let somebody die on my watch alone, that I would always be there holding their hand. Because death, as somebody dies, it's there's almost always a kind of pain in their eyes, a kind of fear as they're going into something new, the people who are aware of what's happening. And there's a comfort, maybe just for me, in holding the hand of somebody who's dying while they take their last breath, what we call the agonal breaths. And as those agonal breaths pass, you sit there and you watch their body go from something that was living, something that could give life, into something that is dying, something that no longer can. These children weren't just robbed of their lives, they were robbed of any kind of dignified death. So were their families. Maybe these children would have died anyway. Some of them were probably sick. That's why they're in an intensive care. But they would have died with loving families. And I think that would have made all the difference in the world. But there was something else. There was another thought that hit me. When you ask yourself the question, like, why? Why did this happen? Why? I'm not yet able personally to say that somebody took a decision to let those children die. I can't process that possibility, you know. And so I want to think that like maybe it was an oversight, maybe they forgot, maybe they didn't know, maybe a million things. But it's
But
very clear to me
Israel took a decision to let them die.
it in a very indirect way, I guess. But like I I understand what you're saying, Ali. I can't personally imagine. I don't want. It's not that like my brain cannot process the possibility that a human being looked at 5 young children and said, "Fuck those kids. We're gonna leave and let them die." I just can't process that right now, and that may very well be exactly what happened. But if I can just sort of carry on the thought a little bit further, it struck me that had it not been for the work of all of these people, us and others, there would have been a death count of 39 higher. Because it's clear that the reason why this happened was because there wasn't enough international pressure on the Israelis, enough public relations pressure, etc. And it's also clear that had they had the same path, had they been able to abandon the 39 kids in Shifa, that most likely that would have happened too. Yeah, to me, it's a sobering reminder of our the mission that we have to make sure that we're protecting all of these patients, while simultaneously, having to bring some accountability into this situation. Anyway, sorry, Ali, I had cut you off a little bit.
No, not at all.
Please.
That's, but I think the big picture. I can understand exactly what you're saying. I think the big picture, though, is that the assault on the hospitals was deliberate. That Israel took the hospitals as targets and set out to systematically destroy them, using these different pretexts and lies, sometimes not even bothering to give an excuse or a pretext, but as John said, as part of their intent to systematically dismantle the infrastructure, the civil infrastructure that makes Gaza livable. So that was the decision, and of course, this is particularly horrifying that these babies were left to die alone. On top of it, but there have been many other patients who died who couldn't be evacuated from the hospitals, or who were unable to remain on life support or kidney dialysis. Several kidney dialysis patients died. One slight piece of good news, of course, good news is all relative, is that they did manage to partially reopen the dialysis unit in Al-Shifa Hospital in order to provide kidney dialysis to people who would have died without it. Tarek, I'm curious what you're hearing about the ability of doctors to do things like that, to restore at least some of these life-saving services, or just how difficult that is to do. One thing nobody needs to have known is that when I was a student, I had an administrative job in the nephrology section at the University of Chicago Hospital. So I spent a lot of time around kidney doctors and patients. And one thing I know is that dialysis requires a lot of supplies, a lot of consumables, as well as the electricity for the machines. So they had said that was only a partial and temporary opening, and it didn't sound like it was sustainable. It was just to provide a one-off dialysis for as many patients as they could. What do you know about that, or what do you think they can do in a situation like that?
Yeah, I'm not a nephrologist, so I haven't, I probably wouldn't even understand the full details of it. However, the broad strokes are pretty clear. Essentially, with dialysis, every time you get dialysis, it resets a counter. And the better the dialysis, the closer that counter resets to 0. And the closer it is to 0, the longer you have before you need dialysis again. At a baseline, Gaza is not able to provide adequate dialysis for all of the patients who are around, like at a baseline. The way that they use the machines, what's called the flows, are inadequate. And that all has to do with the fact that they have to run these machines at 24 hours a day. And so in order to do that successfully, they have to run them at suboptimal sort of settings. Similarly, just like you said, the consumables is another thing. So imagine, for example, the consumable, like what would be a good way to describe it to a non-medical person? Think of the consumable like a tampon, okay? And so basically reusing consumables, which is happening right now, is like reusing tampons. And that is in the cleanliness of it, in sort of all of the different factors, especially, by the way, when you don't have a safe place to go to and clean water to clean it with. And so they're being sent home with the consumables, the various filters and so on, or left with them so that they hold on to them, and then told, okay, come back and bring your consumable because we don't have another one to give you, we don't think. So it's always been terrible. I mean, the dialysis patients were almost the first to die when the blockade started in 2006, 2007, 2005, that time period. And we know that this is not going to be great. But I think what they're doing now is they're trying to buy those patients a little bit of time, maybe time to a ceasefire, maybe time until they get to Egypt, maybe time for whatever. But they know if they don't do this, all of those patients will die.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.